Hello and welcome to Mr. C's History Walk. Behind me is, of course, the Cenotaph, this wonderful slab of Portland stone here in Whitehall in the centre of Westminster. This is one of the most famous memorials to World War One. But what I want to try and do today is find sort of these unknown memorials, or indeed remnants, actual things that were from the First World War that we can still see today. I've done a video on World War II remnants, and there's loads, of course. And we can see that because it was a more recent conflict and, dare I say, more impactful on London. But World War I did certainly have an impact on Britain and Britain's society. And let's see what we can still see about them today across England. Well, it's a very cold day, so I've got my big coat on. And I'm walking through the Kent countryside to try and find a secret hidden relic of World War One. And here they are, these extraordinary pyramid figures. In fact, they're tetrahedrons, and they're known as the Beakspawn tetrahedrons. It's named after RAF Beakspawn, the airfield just over there. They were there originally, and they've been moved here. But nobody really knows what they are, but they think probably they were anti-tank devices. You know, you put them in a field to stop tanks rolling by. Whether they were to be sent to the Western Front or whether they would stay here in England in case of any invasion, I don't know. And they've now all been clumped together and they go off deep into the woods down there, amazingly. But they sort of stand here, and they're rather nice, sort of solid, let's say, tetrahedron in shape. Got numbers on them, some of them as well. I don't know what they mean, but here they are, just lying randomly in this field. The electric pylons, the railway, part of the Kent Main Line is just over there, and you've got this empty field that they all look out on over here, and they sort of stand here in rather splendid isolation. I think they're rather lovely, actually. Deep hidden here in the New Forest is a very unusual memorial to World War One. It's known locally sometimes as the Portuguese fireplace, also sometimes known as the Canadian fireplace. And it is actually a memorial to people from both of those nations. Why is it here? Well, during the First World War, the British Army and indeed the French Army and others, they needed a lot of timber, a lot of wood to build over in the Western Front. Mainly, of course, for the trenches. The trenches needed to be propped up by wood, etc. Most of the wood had been obviously taken in the local area, so they needed wood. Now, at first, Britain got most of its wood from Canada, but then it was harder to cross the Atlantic because the Germans were attacking, etc., etc. So most of the wood had to come from Britain, and one of the key places it came from was here, the New Forest, because it's quite close to the southern ports, which you can sail to France quickly. The British were not very good at chopping down wood, but who was good was the Canadians. They had a lot of wood themselves, so the Canadian Forestry Commission came over here and built and cut down some wood. But they needed people to do the actual horrible, dirty work of cutting things down. The local population had gone off to fight war, so instead they drafted in the Portuguese army. And in quite bad conditions, the Portuguese army felled a lot of the trees around here in the New Forest. And this is a memorial to them. It's a fireplace because any of the surplus wood would, of course, be put into furnace and used to make ash and charcoal, etc. It's a good memorial to recognise the fact it wasn't just soldiers who were a big part of the war effort. It was also people doing manual work to build it through here. And it's in a lovely idyllic setting here in the New Forest. Do come along and have a look. In and around me, you can see a huge frame of metal. I'm by Farnborough Airport, in an industrial estate just outside Farnborough Airport, to see this huge hangar. This was used to build airships, or as the Germans would call them, Zeppelins, but this obviously was in Britain. We would use our airships in World War One for reconnaissance, to look over the trenches, to look over enemy lines to see what was going on, what was happening. The Germans would use them more effectively for bombing. They would send them over to British cities and they would drop bombs, and we'll see a few of those sites as we go along. Now, the British and the Germans, however, they used these, but they weren't very good during World War One. Why? Well, the first thing is obviously they're huge, as you can see from behind me, so they're pretty obvious to see. The other thing, they were big balls of gas, essentially. So one stray bullet, boom, not so good. They were also not very accurate, because people quite literally drop the bombs from it. You can know precise things going on. And the other thing is that they were incredibly slow, because they would just move with the wind and they could easily be picked off. Maybe the advantages of them are that they were very quiet, no engine noise, for example, and the Germans did manage to bomb it a little bit, and you could maybe go at night if it's nice and quiet, etc. But on the whole, they were pretty useless. But do come here, for this was built in 1912 to 1913, and actually it was dismantled after the First World War, and it's been rebuilt subsequently. So it was only up for really a year, and it used in its sense as a factory place to make airships. But come along to Farnborough Airport to see a World War One hangar for airships. I'm here in Ashford in Kent, and behind me is a tank, specifically a World War One tank, specifically a Mark IV tank. Now, many towns in England after the First World War were given as a gift tanks. Most of them actually have been got rid of, but this one still stays the same. And you can come and touch it and see. This symbol here, by the way, is one of the first symbols to show it was British. They changed that symbol and obviously disguised it a little bit as well in subsequent wars, but here it is. Now this is, you can see the World War One battle. It's one of tanks. It's one of those bits where the tracks go all the way around the edge, and you have guns here. There's guns poking out with a little man obviously in there. And this one, actually, you can really start to tell from here why they're called tanks. That was the code name for them, to sort of trick the Germans to think that they were actually water tanks, and the name has stuck all the way to this time. Now, how good were these tanks? Well, it's a bit debatable, really. Some people think they're very important, and people cite the Battle of Cambrai, where people thought that these tanks, these Mark IV tanks, which were a great improvement on the other ones, were able to overcome the trench system. That is true, but I think the reason why they're able to overcome them was the number of them and the psychological impact. These tanks got stuck in the mud. They didn't move very fast. They weren't actually that bulletproof. People sort of had heat exhaustion and were blown up in them. So they were not a great auspicious start. But of course, the tank was extremely useful in World War II. So the origin story of it is very important. But you can come along here to Ashford and see a real World War I tank. Now, this may look a very normal, nondescript suburban North London street, but actually behind me at 16 Oldcombe Road in Stoke Newington, it's a very significant place in the history of London, because this is where the first ever aerial bomb dropped on London. On the evening of the 31st of May 1915, an airship, a Zeppelin, was flying in the skies over here. Big, huge thing, easy to spot, moving very slowly, but it dropped its load onto London. It's not the first aerial bombardment in the world. That was in the Turco-Italian War on Libya in 1911. It's not even the first bomb actually dropped on Britain, because there were a few raids onto Dover, but this was on London. The significance, we move on to World War II, the Blitz, etc., but it all started here in Stoke Newington. So this really is a very significant place, really. And I just going back to that thing about this idea of this huge, oh, there's a plane right there now, but actually it would have been an airship, huge thing, going very slowly. Yes, easy to shoot down, you'd think nowadays, but this would have been so alien to people, the idea of this thing. What on earth is it going to do? They would just look up at it and suddenly a bomb would drop. So rather interesting. But I know this is not quite tangible about bombing of World War One, but let's go and see something now which is a little bit more tangible about the aerial bombardment of London during World War One. This, of course, is Cleopatra's Needle. And if you watch my ancient Egypt video, you've seen all the history about that. But there is a World War I connection to Cleopatra's Needle, specifically on the Sphinx's, the one to the right-hand side of you on the street here, because these shrapnel scars, these sort of holes, are actually from a World War I bomb. We've just been in Stoke Newington to see the attack from the plane, but that came from the Zeppelin. This was one of the first attacks. It was on the 4th of September 1917. It came from an aeroplane. Airplane had flown over, I don't know, from northern France perhaps, or something like that, and had come and dropped a bomb in the street just here behind me. I mean, Parliament's not far away, so perhaps that was the ultimate aim. And it exploded in the roadway, and you can actually see it goes all the way down here. There's quite a significant bit, actually a bit on the obelisk itself. There's even little bits in the Sphinx that you can actually go in there and see that bit. So rather real, some real tangible examples here of World War I is still existing. I think this is a good place to end. I started in Whitehall over there, talking about the cenotaph, and I've been all over the south of England, haven't I? Farnborough, etc., and way down in Kent. Not so much in London, perhaps, because it's over nearly 100 years old, over 100 years old, a lot of these remnants, and so they've all been built over or whatever. So it's much, much harder to find. But I hope you've enjoyed that, and don't forget to subscribe, watch the World War II remnants, and I'll see you next time.